Taming Lightning is made available by blog, podcast, and video for educational purposes only, as well as to give you general information and a general understanding of plasma and neon, including the following topics, but not limited to: high vacuum, electrical, and chemistry. By using the information, you understand that any and all instruction provided may be of incomplete knowledge and is not intended to be used without professional guidance and supervision. Taming Lightning Podcast is supported by the Pittsburgh Glass Center, a nonprofit public access glass studio and one of the top glass facilities of its kind in the U.S., with a knowledgeable and friendly staff and a safe, fun atmosphere. Our community is made up of artists, collectors, students, or just those fascinated by glass. Depending on your interest and schedule, there's a class for you, be it a 2-hour introductory workshop, 8-week classes, or 5-day summer intensives taught by artists from all over the world. And guess what, Lightning Tamers? I'm not the only neon podcast. That's right, Mondo Neon has started their own podcast. They just launched their first episode in April with Rich Flores. Please check it out at mondoneon.com/podcast. Welcome back, or welcome to the Taming Lightning Podcast. I'm Percy Eccles II. I'm the creator and host of Taming Lightning, as well as emerging neon tech at Pittsburgh Glass Center, where I'm researching and developing a space for exploring plasma and neon light. Taming Lightning is an educational blog and podcast about the art, science, and history of plasma and neon light, looking beyond its associations with novelty and sign making, and to explore the potential of rare or noble gases by learning about those that use them. We'll be talking with artists, makers, and researchers, each guest offering their unique knowledge and experience. The intro is Boost by Joachim Karud. Joachim is a Swedish artist who loves to create chill and happy music, and does so for copyright-free use. Be sure to support his music by giving credit when used, subscribing, and/or by donation via Patreon. You can find him on Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify. In today's podcast, we'll be talking with Harriet Swarzrock, an Australian glass artist who has recently finished a residency at the Canberra Glassworks, where she explored the use of both plasma and neon in her work. I invited her onto the podcast after seeing her posts on Facebook and Instagram. Initially hesitant to the invitation, she was happy to share her experience as a glassblower at the beginning of a new process. Here, we'll be illuminating the struggles of learning plasma, the issues she had to overcome, as well as the role of the residency for artists developing new work, as well as the importance of mentorship and support.
Hello, my name is Harriet Swarzrock. I mostly get called Harry, and I'm a glassblower and artist and really novice neon explorer, working predominantly at the Canberra Glassworks, but I also have a studio with my partner Matthew Curtis in a town just near Canberra. So we have a hot shop and cold shop, and I've been exploring organic blown glass forms and now being able to introduce plasma into that mix of making those organic shapes come alive.
Now, can you talk about how you even approached neon or plasma? How did you even get involved in that?
I was really fortunate. A couple of years ago, I had a really short residency at the Canberra Glassworks, like a 6-week artist in residence program that they run. And during that time, I had the great fortune of there being a neon workshop that was run by Richard Wheater, who's a neon, and I guess an artist from the UK who works with neon. and an Australian artist who uses neon in his work, Brendan Van Heck. And they ran this 1 week really beginner kind of workshop. And during that time, Richard was there. We had a lot of ironing out of the equipment. The Glassworks had brought equipment really early on in its setup, but it hadn't been installed. So there was a whole lot of getting the shop set up before the workshop. So seeing that kind of come together was pretty fascinating during that 6-week residency, and then participating in the workshop in a sort of a really rudimentary kind of fashion of learning some basics of neon bending, and then chatting with Richard. There was that sort of opportunity to use some of the hot shop glass and attach a few electrodes onto it and sort of explore that element that the Glassworks is probably better set up for, because we have an oven pumping system rather than a bombarder. So it was, I guess it was just sort of fortuitous. And in the last couple of days of the residency, this really generous and amazing neon bender, second-generation neon bender from Melbourne, came up with his apprentice. She's this incredible woman. So Stephen Cole is the neon bender with a shop in Melbourne, and his apprentice, Emma Kate Hart, came up as well. And they just came up to meet Richard and Brendan and to see what was happening at the Glassworks. And Stephen is so passionate about neon being an approachable medium that it was really infectious.
Yeah, I've keyed in on Stephen Cole, and he does have this very organic feel. I think who tied me into that was Kiki Jewel, the 2 podcast episodes back. So we're all connected. We're all like, neon
cousins.
It's
pretty nice. It's like 3 degrees of separation, maybe, rather than 7. It's it's exciting.
So
yes.
Can you talk a little about the residency at the?
In Canberra. So
Canberra,
Canberra is the capital of Australia, and it's this really small territory that is within New South Wales. I guess they don't like to be called within New South Wales, but New South Wales is the state where Sydney is. So Canberra's inland a little bit from there, and there's this incredible building that's been given over to the Canberra Glassworks, and it's an existing power station. It was the first power station in Canberra, so it's this really extraordinary building. And it's been running now for 10 years, and for the last 3 years they've run a program where there's a fellowship for 1 year. It's an incredible thing that the Glassworks is doing to have like a resident artist in there working for the year. And for this fellowship, we ended up splitting the residency, or they decided to split the residency into 2 6-month fellowships. So currently there's Stephen Chesky, who's an American glassblower, who's doing a 6-month.
Yeah, we went to school together.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so Steve's in there now. And so I had, it sort of ended up being slightly longer than 6 months, because I had to take a little 6-week break out because we had a little bit of trouble with the neon manifold. But it's a supported fellowship, so you have a stipend. And in Steve's case, he is also staying. There's a small building that's annexed within the property that he's able to stay at. I live really close by, so I just stayed at home and sort of had this incredible experience afforded to me where I had the opportunity to work in the neon shop, which obviously I don't have that set up here in my own studio. and access to hot glass and cold glass and the kiln for the oven pumping. So it really gave me the freedom to experiment and to work with particularly Tom Rowney, who is the sort of head technician at the Canberra Glassworks and a really, amazingly skilled glassblower, in order to sort of iron out some of the aspects of the neon area that I've sort of jokingly been calling the nearly neon sort of shop for the last 6 months. So, we've had our little ups and downs and struggles and issues with the manifold and, I guess all the things that happen, but without the probably 20 years of experience that you need to really navigate all of those nuances in the equipment. So, yeah, it has been really an incredible experience to have, I guess, that freedom to make mistakes and for it not to be, not to have the financial pressure of, most things working. I mean, I know nobody's practice has everything working, but in those development sort of phases, it's incredibly empowering to have that support so that you can sort of give yourself a little bit of a break when things aren't going to plan.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. And that's one of the things that I kind of miss from being at school was the ability to fail a lot and more frequently so I can learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, working in an area where, Stephen Cole in Melbourne was really, or is really, just such an amazing mentor to have, but getting sort of intermittent support or support over the phone, like sometimes you feel like you're sort of banging around in the dark a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's this great community of makers, but sometimes you kind of don't find out things until, you have that experience of really talking through something with somebody. Or for me, I guess maybe for most of us, quite visual sort of experiential people, I almost need to be in that monkey see, monkey do kind of environment to really soak in the nuances of the material. So it's been really, fantastic to have those little experiences where Steve's come up to teach for a week, or Emma Kate's come up and I've been able to TA for her for a beginner's bending class. So it's been, it's big, baby steps, but it's been really amazing.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. As I've been working on getting a neon lab set up for Pittsburgh Glass Center, talking through with Mundy Hepburn and talking through with Bruce Suba and many of the other individuals from the plasma or neon community has definitely helped me through when my brain just couldn't process things on its own.
Yeah. And I guess there are just so many little tricks and experiences and I guess nuances with all the different setups. So I feel like now I can understand a little bit about what people are saying or explaining through having my own experiences in a very kind of rudimentary fashion. So it certainly makes, I guess it makes it you be able to be part of the conversation.
Definitely. Your show, your ending product was the Hearts and Minds exhibition, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, or at least briefly, about that and how you come about to using the heart with the plasma neon?
Yeah, sure. I was really fortunate to be curated into a show, and and it was sort of right at the end of my residency, so it was a really tight deadline to kind of get the prototyping and the pieces working. But I worked on two different pieces, and the first piece was more traditional sort of neon bending to make a sort of a xenon form of backwards writing for the word interconnected that then reflects down into a mirrored form. And I guess I'd had that opportunity to learn the bending techniques, but in the intervals when I was able to work with Stephen and Richard and Brendan, the sort of opportunity to work with that single electrode object was such an attractive option for me. And the blown glass heart form is something that I've sort of dipped in and out of and made different installations with that kind of form. And I think that the fit for that idea of exploring, rather than fluidity, the fluidity of the material, which is something that I think I've touched on in other sort of installations and iterations of using that heart form, but to kind of get to delve into the ideas of electricity in the body through the use of the single electrode neon piece, where with the driver that I was using, it's very responsive to touch rather than being a really, I guess, strong kind of plasma movement. It's more about that sort of interactivity that I guess I was able to kind of draw on ideas that I'd had about this form and to be able to flesh it out a little bit more and to give this idea of interconnection and having sort of a sea of forms that are all quite similar but quite different was really attractive to me. And it gave me, I don't know, it just gave me this sort of idea of repetition of something that's similar, but then that sort of exploration of working with the different gases trapped inside the form and how the architecture of the shape sort of influences the movement of the gas, and then seeing the forms finished, getting that kind of feedback of how different people respond to different, I guess, the different effects of the plasma within the forms has been really, really wonderful for me, actually. It's been quite an amazing journey to sort of have an idea and then to have the idea almost work how the idea was like how I'd anticipated it to come out, and then to have, as somebody who works in glass, part of the draw for me for this project was that interactivity and the touch, which was kind of alluring just in and of itself.
In your short little video that was made based on your residency, I saw that you were working with someone who added a sound component to your installation.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really sweet actually. We so in the show Hearts and Minds, there are 4 pieces, and there's the first neon piece that I mentioned of mine, more traditional bending, and then the sort of installation of 60 heart forms. And then there's this incredible over life-sized glass armature piece made by an artist, Penny Byrne, in collaboration with the Barengo studio for one of the glass dress exhibitions. So it was exhibited in Australia, but I got the opportunity in being involved in this show to kind of explore the idea of working with sound artist Brian McNamara, and just had this incredible privilege of, I mean, it's not really a collaboration because Brian did so much more, but that incredible privilege of being able to hand over some components to him which then became something else. So Brian hooked up 2 pairs of hearts. So we hooked up a whole lot of different forms and found 2 pairs that had similar kind of frequency draws. And then he worked with those and set up this sensor-operated, I guess, sound contraption where as you walk past, you wake the sensor up, and then as you touch either of the 4 heart forms, you affect the sound that's coming from those forms. And for Brian, he was explaining to me that with the other sound sculpture he makes, often when you touch the forms, you initiate creating a sound, whereas with working with the high frequency, which is like an incredible mystery in and of itself, it seemed to almost do the reverse through the work that he was doing, where as you touch the forms, it sort of removes the sound, or the sound calms down. So 2 of the pairs have this almost like whooshing kind of fluid sound, a little like, I guess, a bit of like a mournful kind of wail song that sort of calms as you touch it. And the other 2 in the other pair have quite a syncopated ultrasound, heartbeat sound that really calms as you touch it. So is this a really poetic kind of beautiful thing about affecting stillness in an object? And I think that really resonated with me, because I think that that's, a little story that I remember from my childhood of, when you're trying to be still and, realizing that even when you hold your breath, you can still hear your heartbeat and that you can affect that rhythm. That was a really beautiful sort of poetic kind of memory and a beautiful link for me with that work.
Oh yeah, that just blows my mind. Like, just a nice little, happy accident, happy coincidence, just things coming together in ways that are kind of unexpected.
Yeah, it was really unexpected. And Brian is this incredible, electronic engineer who's worked with Boeing and incredible sensor material and work, and hadn't really spent any time working with high frequency. So high voltage. So, the way that the frequency was affected by the voltage was sort of, that beautiful sort of unexpected, serendipitous kind of effect.
So, my next question here is kind of, if you can, kind of break down a bit of the process.
Yeah.
You make your form, right, in the hot shop. I've attached my electrode, and I've been more successful attaching while it's on the pipe and then knocking off and putting it away. But a couple of your videos in our conversation on Instagram showed that you found yourself more successful when attaching it after it came out the annealer and then re-annealing that.
Yeah, and I, like I said, I'm a total novice, and I had incredible friends sort of saying, I've seen people attach them hot, and I had a go with a couple of different glass blowers. And when I was speaking actually with Steve Chesky recently, he was sort of suggesting that maybe it was the type of electrode as well. Like, I was having a lot of trouble with the electrode cracking where the glass doubles over, where the wires come out of the electrode, out of that top end or the tubulated end. So it for whatever reason, I have this quite substantial bowl of shame of broken electrodes that I'm going to have a little experiment with at some stage. Stephen Cole has sort of suggested that, maybe at some point I can try making my own with furnace glass and encasing the components inside. But I had a lot more success in joining the electrode on, cold. So I would blow the form, and I would have, like, of the 4 or 5 sort of ventrically forms, I would have one open aperture that was approximately the diameter of the electrode that I was aiming to attach on. And then I would cold work the form, so cold work off the punty and have that one open edge sticky tape shut, magic of tape. Mm-hmm. And then after I'd cold worked it, what I ended up finding was that I was processing between 3 and 5 pieces in the annealer at the same time, but sort of aiming towards that 5 pieces. Mm-hmm. And if I started in the morning and I would, start with the first piece and set it up in the clamp and have a propane oxy hand torch, I'd gently candle that one open end and sort of cover the other parts with, like, offcuts of old Kevlar gloves, and then gently heat that up, and then, obviously build up the temperature in that, particularly in that glass section and the very edge of the electrode, and then join that on, blow through a blow hose, get, a good join, and then candle that temperature down a little bit with a gassier flame, and then, cross my fingers and hope that didn't cool down too quickly, and get that in the kiln. When I was getting them in the kiln in the same day, I was, catching that kind of cooling down rate enough that I had very few that cracked. Mm-hmm. In that sort of initial stage of bringing the temperature back up. So I was essentially bringing the forms then in the oven pumping process, once I joined the electrodes on, back up to the annealing temperature of the glass. Okay. And then bringing having the pump running, drawing out the vacuum, and then experimenting with the different gases in the morning when they'd be back down to room temperature. So I was working with a manifold that has 2 ports for gas, or for different gases. So for most of them, for all of the heart forms, actually, I did use neon. Some of them are just only neon at a very low pressure for that beautiful diffuse sort of pink light. And then sort of experimenting with the different pressures and ratios, and hooking up a small transformer and power supply so that I could test them as I was going. So, I sort of would have an idea that I'll do maybe 2 runs of processing with neon and argon, and have a bit of an idea of which ones I thought I'd just do low pressure neon in, but I'd test all of them and sort of have that sort of interesting experience that although the forms are all quite similar, that you get kind of different effects depending on the interior architecture of the forms. So it was kind of that really sort of playful kind of opportunity to see how the colour and the form changed depending on the gas pressures. So there's been some good little experiments. So I had the great fortune of working with 4 different gases, so neon predominantly, and then argon, krypton, and xenon. So, it's been quite an experience. I was kind of terrified the first few times, because, there's so much effort goes through into all the different stages, and then that sort of final little bit of heating up the tubulation to close it off. I felt a little bit like I didn't quite know what was going on the first time, where I didn't actually feel like some incredible adrenaline hit. I thought I must have broken myself, that I was sort of okay with doing that. But so I I know that there are probably much easier ways of joining the electrode on, but I just had so little success with it that I'm really looking forward to participating in some classes in the future in the States and being a part of that sort of joining it on in the hot shop kind of process. But I sort of ended up having a reasonably controlled kind of heating system and got a good understanding for the amount of time that I had to use that, gassier flame and build up the temperature and then really bump up the oxygen in order to get that hot enough join surface for both the glass and the electrode. So one of my friends who works in at the Glassworks, we'd have a good joke about how healthy our swear jars were and how we could probably travel to Fiji with the money from all the swearing that we'd undertaken. So it's been an incredible. I guess the support from the residency means that some of that incredible frustration is mitigated, and it really allowed me to just keep pushing through. And I guess, there's nothing like a deadline of, having a show opening to really make you push through. And I guess I hadn't really anticipated naively how much, how much time wiring up 60 units was going to take. So I was having a bit of a chuckle with my two teenage sons that I sort of stole their summer holiday off them this year. They became art slaves that were wiring out in the studio with Matt. So, I owe my family big time as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, with the electrodes, there's like a million different methods, and I was just curious to ask you about that in general. I found, when I was talking with Pat liked to preheat his electrodes before he attaches them hot. I found that when I did that, it didn't work for me. I cracked it too many times, and it just somehow worked for me to heat it up and stick it on while it's hot. And some people, it breaks on them when they do that. I did try.
I had a couple of different tries of all of the above, and I think maybe it's it'd be totally about timing, and I think that seeing people who have experience with it would make it easier for me thinking about it retrospectively. But I guess I came up with so many, like I was getting cracks consistently in the same spot. And even with preheating, I was getting cracks as I was candling them up before preheating them, and all sorts of things. So I just kind of had to go back to what I'd seen Richard Wheater do when he was initially over those couple of years ago, where he just like held the electrode in his hand and warmed it up a little bit in the palm of his hand, and then gently candled up the glass and the electrode. So I guess for me that was probably the first sort of demonstration that I really saw, and probably that sort of influenced how much I was able to persevere with it, because I'd really seen that kind of work. And I do look forward to having a go at it in the hot shop with somebody who knows how to do it well. Steve Chesky said he'd had success doing that a few times as well. So while he's around, I'd like to experiment and take a session in the Glassworks with him as well. But I guess it was that kind of, looming deadline, and just having to go with something that I could make work. And I mean, I also had, I had that really frustrating experience of putting them on cold, in inverted commas, and, getting into a good rhythm of putting them on, and then thinking, okay, great, I'll I'll do 12 today and then process 5 and process the next 5 tomorrow. And I found consistently that if I didn't get them in the kiln on the same day, that the glass would break just below the electrodes. So I had to, I guess, work at a rhythm in order to get that success. And I know that it's, very beginner kind of level, but I had to just work around the way that I could work.
Yeah, that's very important to hear, because sometimes when you're processing, making work at a higher level than your beginning, you forget how those little struggles get you there. And I think right now, the Plasma Art Alliance, one of the goals is to be able to get people on the same page as kind of progressing in their understanding of how to make the work, how to do it safely, and all that stuff. And even just hearing your run-throughs on it, and many other sharing, is very helpful. I also saw that you were doing multiple tubulations, right?
In some of them I was, yeah. I predominantly ended up using just the strawed tubulated electrode and just having one on there. But yeah, I did a couple where I had a couple of electrodes on there, but I didn't have that same incredible sort of effect that I'd hoped for, which was that interactivity with touch. So, yeah. And I guess, it looks so simple when you see people's beautiful work, but man, the amount of stuff that goes into it is kind of mind-blowing, and it's just incredible to have a little bit more insight into these incredible processes and things that, people worked out not that long ago, and were able to, I guess in inverted commas, mine the gases and be able to create a vacuum and all of these things that when I see the equipment that we've got, I just think, wow, how did they do that in the, early 1900s with none of these kind of motors? It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's totally amazing. Well,
yeah, so I think it's really it's sort of fascinating to get that insight, and it's and I'm trying not to be intimidated by people who've got these years of experience. I just feel really privileged that I get to have an experience of doing it and have a good fit for the work that I was doing, and really learn a lot, like even that sort of back end of the electronics and the grounding back to power and all of those kind of nuances to make the work safe, especially for work that's being touched. So it was really, it was a steep learning curve, and I'm not a very logical thinker. I'm not a very technical glass blower. I'm pretty organic and loose in a lot of ways, and I think that part of the incredible process was kind of learning about that more logical thinking, which I'm working on.
So what would you say are some, important lessons that you learned from the process itself, whether it be how to work or, safety concerns?
With safety concerns, I guess, for the actual making, I sort of find that I'm almost wearing safety glasses when I cook now. I'm just like, wear your glasses, We have a studio at our home, and 2 wonderful teenage boys, and, they're in there using equipment all the time, and I'm just like, you can't even go in without your glasses on. I don't care if you don't have the other things going, like safety equipment, but that's really important to me. And I think it just makes me nervous now, even in the hot shop when I see people without glasses on. I'm just like, But I think that, from that sort of perspective of the safety of the work, I was really, it just didn't make sense to me not to use a 3-pin point and ground back into power. I really want to have that knowledge that if people are touching the work, that they're not going to get that, grounding buzz. I think that, in working in the studio and on your own work, and throughout the processes, I think that, come on, you're going to get burnt, cut and buzzed like a couple of times a week. I think that as a beginner, I think that is par for the course, that, obviously not badly hurt, but little encounters with the material. I think that it's really fascinating to glean information from people who have a lot of experience, and to get some little pointers, even about which way you stand or which direction you have your setup facing. All of those things really make small and incredible differences that maybe you don't understand when you first overwhelmed by the amazingness and the amazing difficulty of the learning of it. So I think as far as producing the work, that having that safety element was paramount. And the pieces are so I have, in that one bigger work, Between Stillness and Movement, I've got 60 pieces on the wall, and a couple of them have a couple of hearts in them, but they're all each backing board or open box that's on the wall has its own power point, and they're all that sort of 3-pin plug. And if I ended up buying the drivers from the States, and then using different power supplies for LED lighting or for medical supplies in order to get the right voltage to the units, and then grounding everything back with the green earth wire back into the power earth. That was that had to happen, and all of the work had to be tested and tagged to be exhibited in the gallery. So that was a steep learning curve for me, not being somebody who has an electrical background, but it was it had to happen. So I was really pleased that I could make quite a tight unit that hides most of that wiring, apart from the actual electrical cord, which I think I quite enjoy, that the cord is sort of part of that entire work. But obviously safety with electricity, so important.
All right, so going back to when you're processing your hearts, when you had you in the morning, you put all these electrodes on them and stuck them together, you kind of had them branched out.
Oh yeah.
And now I heard about doing that, from 3 different people, but I couldn't visualize what that actually looked like. And it wasn't until you had shown, a little clip of it, you doing that I understood exactly what that meant. So I want to say that I guess I appreciate you showing that part of the process, because it made it so much clearer to me how that would work if I want to kind of batch things together. But you had briefly spoke that even though you had pretty much the same shapes of a similar volume, when you started to fill them up, you noticed that they all kind of had their own little personality.
Yeah. So the setup at the Glassworks is oven pumping, and which works really well with that single electrode sort of tubulated electrodes. So we have the manifold and the vacuum pump set up on a table beside the kiln. So the doors open up to the kiln and the manifold is sort of at the side of the kiln.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got 2 straws that come from the manifold and perforate the side of the kiln. And so in end effect, you could really just very simply just attach 2 pieces onto that manifold. But I guess with sort of the tight deadline and, it's a access studio, and that kiln gets used for annealing as well and for drying moulds and all sorts of different things. So it was obviously made a lot more sense to have multiple tubulations come off. So I would just, with the, I guess, maybe it's like a 6 mil tube for processing, I would, blow a side out on one piece and then join another piece onto it so that I'd make sort of a Y shape, or you could, make an L bend or all sorts of different things. I guess you just need to be able to get that sort of extender kind of component back onto that initial aperture that comes out from the manifold. So I have this kind of rickety kind of setup of all sorts of different bricks to support that kind of that glass. But in speaking with Stephen Cole and also with Gavin Tiernan, who is based around Brisbane in Australia, he has a background of neon, I guess, from the UK, and he was sort of explaining to me that they would do this oven pumping process and they would hook up multiple pieces, like 100 pieces in the kiln. So after I sort of heard that, I just kind of went, I've just got to be braver with that, making branches to be able to attach more pieces onto it. So once you've got for most of the time I was processing 5 pieces at the same time. So just having like one tubulation come out that had a Y join and then another one that had a Y with another Y on it so that I could get the 5 pieces in, just staggering them in the kiln, and then obviously having all but one of those closed as I joined the heart onto the one furthest at the back of the kiln. And then I would systematically work down, from the back toward the door, join all those pieces on, and then I'd turn the pump on and check using the Tesla coil to make sure that I didn't have any leaks. And I'd have to check where I made the Y connection, if it was a new connection, in order to make sure that I didn't have a pinhole there or anything. So I would really join them all on and then check. And I think I need to purchase a new Tesla coil for the Glassworks because it's got such a sensitive dial on it that it's either really high or really low. And I had this one terrible day where I punctured holes into pieces and had my little cry in the kiln that this was all terrible. But I could obviously see what was going on, and with some feedback from amazing people on Instagram as well, I just kind of went, yeah, that's right, I've just got to be more careful. And I guess I've got to trust that the only places you really need to check are exactly where the joins are. And I just unfortunately punctured holes in places where I shouldn't have been checking, but you live and learn. So, so then I would have these 5 pieces connected up to the manifold, and I would shut the kiln doors and turn the vacuum pump on and go up to annealing, and then up to the stress point of the glass, and in the furnace glass that we're using, that's like 500 degrees Celsius. So, there was a little bit of a concern that maybe that was too high for the electrodes, but I ended up having that sort of wonderful experience of putting them on and then seeing that they were just so much cleaner and brighter looking after going up to that temperature than even when we were using the induction coil around them. So I'd have these 5 pieces in, they'd go up to temperature and then back down through annealing. The next morning they'd be at room temperature. I would be able to turn the stopcock off, turn the vacuum pump off, and then go through. And initially I would add 5 torr of neon gas and then go through with my little unit that had the power supply and the transformer, and just like clip those on with little crocodile clips and just test from the back of the kiln to the front and go, wow, that actually I didn't expect to look great with just the 5 torr neon, but that's the one that I'll keep at that. And then bring the neon torr up again and then insert argon or krypton or xenon gas, whichever one was the other gas that I had set up on the manifold. So I think that, it was kind of, that was a really kind of almost like a painterly experience, kind of getting that feel for the colour and the movement, just with those little nuanced changes and having that incredible experience of, a hollow, seemingly empty void being excited and illuminated by these different kind of ratios of these gases that are interacting with the magnetic field, was really, really beautiful and really gave diversity to the similarities within the forms, especially when they're all hung together. So, yeah, the difference with sort of that interior architecture and how that affected the flow of the gas, it was really fascinating for me that it sort of almost came full circle, where it went from this idea of electricity in the body to almost looking like fluid again. It looks like some of them look like little delta rivers, or that really interesting sort of convergence of both of those ideas for me, of the fluidity and then the electricity within the body. So that was really really fascinating to see. And I think, after one conversation with Gavin Tiernan and one with Stephen Cole, where I was really nervous about hooking up the more expensive gases, and they're like, it's just expensive air, just have a go. And that was kind of liberating and also kind of terrifying to start with. But yeah, just seeing those differences in the sort of in the frequency and the cadence of how that beautiful arc moves around the form, was fascinating each morning to have that kind of mini experiment of it. So as I've gone through, I've marked down the in my scribbly, scrawly handwriting on a little sticky note that I stuck to the pieces, that is now like in a book where I've catalogued them. I can go back and I can see, that one was, that much neon and that much argon, or that one's a krypton one. And I think now when I look at the forms, it's kind of, I didn't think that I'd be able to sort of hold that catalogue in my mind, but I feel like I can sort of go, I think that one is, 120 torr neon and 40 torr argon, and like I can, I've got an experience for that movement within those kind of the tight confines of the small forms that I've been doing.
Do you find that did you have any trouble using color when you were messing around with this, or did you find out fairly quickly that what color to use and how much to use?
I used sort of just thin veneers of blowing color on the inside of the bubble. I used quite pale colors predominantly. I've used some opal whites, which were kind of beautiful because it's kind of like this incredible feeling of, experiencing a cloud almost, lightning storm within a cloud or something. But I did a series, like a couple of runs in the hot shop where I made some work where it was using the uranium oxide and then putting a veneer of gold ruby or scarlet over the top. And those pieces, obviously, when they're blown out, it's not a lot of colour that's in there, but you get that fluorescing of the uranium within the sort of colour of the glass. So there are some kind of haunting, almost spooky kind of colours within the mix. And probably the most fascinating sort of use of colour was that using quite pink glass. Sometimes it was cerise, sometimes it was gold ruby extra. And then having that surreal moment where you're plugging in something that's got neon and xenon gas in it, and then having the form turn blue rather than be pink with the line through it. That was actually, I thought something was broken, but I guess that's about like a wavelength colour change rather than a chemical colour change. And that was sort of even more, I guess, intriguing that, those ideas about perception and shifts in our perception and what we see and what we don't see. So, using the different colours was makes that sort of diversity within the similar forms more apparent. And I think that was sort of important for me to have that, I guess, that undertone of, if we look at the heart form and that maybe that's representative of, a person that, we're all a little different, but we're all the same. So having those differences in the colour, I think, ended up being quite powerful within seeing the whole.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast today, especially after, slogging through all the whole residency and putting out work and putting together an exhibition. So I really appreciate able to come back to me and be able to spend some time on the podcast and stuff.
Thank you. I think my experience of learning a little bit about neon and plasma was sort of outside of my comfort zone, so I thought I should continue, even though it's a little outside of my comfort zone. It's been lovely chatting with you, Percy, and I look forward to meeting you and all of these other amazing plasma neon people in the years to come.
So the question I sometimes ask people is, who would you recommend on the podcast next?
Wow. Okay. I almost don't know enough people. Richard Wheater, he's a fascinating artist who uses neon, and his approach is, is about that sort of interactive and performance sort of side, even though he is an incredible technician. So I think a discussion with Richard Wheater from the UK would be, pretty interesting conversation.
The outro is The Process by Lakey Inspired. Jordan, aka Lakey, is a Los Angeles-based artist with the goal of inspiring others to create by sharing positive music around the world. Thus, he works hard to produce music every week for copyright-free use. Be sure to support his music by giving credit when used, subscribing, and/or by donation via Patreon. You can find him on Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Thank you for listening to the Taming Lightning podcast. I'd like to thank Harry for taking the time to be on the podcast, especially between residencies, and for being open to talk about her experience in working with such a new and difficult medium. Also, I'd like to thank Pittsburgh Glass Center for supporting me as a place of research and inspiration, as well as encouraging me to pursue this project. And the Plasma Art Alliance, where I have an access to a well of knowledge and connects me to some amazing people. Keep an eye out for more classes at Pittsburgh Glass Center as we work to provide a space for learning neon and plasma. Check us out at www.pittsburghglasscenter.org or call our studio at 412-365-2145. If you'd like to support the podcast, simply go to PercyEccles.com and look for Taming Lightning, or by typing taminglightning.net and click subscribe. Later, there will probably be other options in the future, but for now, like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.